Journalist Parmi Olson spent a year researching Anonymous, the loose hacktivist collective that's caused quite a stir with their notorious takedowns of multiple government websites. Her new book, called We Are Anonymous, Inside the Hacker World of Lulzsec, Anonymous, and the Global Cyber Insurgency, follows the group from its inception to its infiltration and arrests of several members. Parmi Olson joined me earlier to discuss the evolution of Anonymous and where the group may go next. Take a listen.
Well, Anonymous makes itself very available to people who want to actually reach out and talk to them. And a lot of people have asked me, how did I actually get the access that I got? It really just started with reaching out and asking questions. A lot of the reports about Anonymous in the media, you'll notice, tend to, I don't want to say regurgitate, but kind of work off other reports that have already come out about Anonymous. There are a lot of misconceptions out there about what it is. For instance, that it's a group. It's not really a group. It's a community or a very nebulous, loosely based network of people. And so in order to talk to them, I started out just by reaching out to some of their observers, people who were well known, so not really spokespeople, but observers of the network, and then asked to be put in touch with others who were in the UK because I was based there. And it just turned out that some of the people that I was talking to ended up being quite senior, well-known people within the network. And they also ended up being the key interviewees in my book who also went on to create Lulzsec, the splinter group, the hacker splinter group.
When you were talking to these individuals, Parmi, did you at any point think that you might be getting in the way of potential FBI investigations with some of them?
That I might be gaining away? Sorry.
Or getting in the way of FBI investigations with some of the members?
I don't think so. I mean, it's such a large community of people that, I mean, just reaching out to them isn't going to get in the way of, I can't imagine that it would get in the way of anyone beyond just creating that relationship. And for the most part, a lot of the time, what Anonymous is doing isn't necessarily illegal. There are a lot of legal aspects to what they do in terms of raising awareness of various issues. And so I never had that impression, no.
What do you think the largest misconception, I know you said that the mainstream media and a lot of talking points are regurgitated that put them in a different light than they really are. What would you say the biggest misconception about Anonymous is in the mainstream light right now?
I think the biggest misconception is that it is this large, calculating, malevolent group or organization, when really it's quite messy in some ways, and it still works. It's still effective and resilient, but just in the way that it works, it's leaderless. There really are no leaders or hierarchy. There are certainly leading figures or figureheads within it, and also the fact that it doesn't plan ahead. It really is, a lot of the people within it are opportunistic, so there's lots of cells or nodes within the network who use the name Anonymous when they launch attacks, or if they do campaigns, they'll invoke that name Anonymous, and because so much has been done in the past under that name, attacks, then it creates a sense of fear and mystery, and it calls attention to whatever they're doing. This really speaks to the power of the internet to manipulate public perceptions, and that's something that Anonymous has done really well, is create this, not an illusion, but almost a mirage of power and scale, when oftentimes it is just small groups of people, young people, working together online.
Yeah, it definitely does create that intrigue, and when a lot of people are picking up the name of Anonymous, it does create a large perception that they are this nefarious, nameless, faceless entity that can really bring down the entire infrastructure of certain things, like we see in a lot of talking points from the government. You know, it's really barely been 4 years since Anonymous really started on this message board. In the first chapter of your book, it almost reads like this fantasy. I mean, were you overwhelmed when you started the research of how much has happened in such a short time?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And on the online world, it's almost like you're in a time warp. Things move at such a frenetic pace. I really almost feel for people who are kind of on the side of the authorities, the FBI, who are using informants to kind of try and investigate what Anonymous does, because it moves so fast, and for anyone to try and drum up charges on someone and to go through all the red tape that I'm sure these authorities have will be a really difficult process. And yes, having researched the book over the course of a year and then sort of written it over 7 months. So much happened in that time. The story was constantly unfolding. The small group of people that I sort of embedded myself with ended up being the ones who were launching these high-profile attacks. And one of them ended up being an FBI informant who was actually gathering intelligence on his team members. This was Hector Sabu Montsegur. His nickname was Sabu. He was based in New York. And this was really a surprise to the whole Anon community when it came out that he was an informant. So lots of different things happening in a very short space of time. But again, this is the internet, and that's how things work online. Everything's just happening so fast.
Right. And according to your book, Assange directly appealed to Lulzsec, and we know, like you said, Sabu was working for months as an informant after you reached out to him. Do you think that the FBI was able to infiltrate WikiLeaks through the group?
I think one thing it's important to note about that part of the book is that prior to that, I do indicate that the person in Assange's inner circle who arranged that discussion between Lulzsec and WikiLeaks was someone who it's not clear that that person was a creditable actual WikiLeaks operator, and we understand that he was actually trolling people from time to time. So we can't say with 100% certainty that Assange was behind those directions, and so there's been some misinterpretation of that part of the book. But I would say, I mean, for anybody who's working on the side of the authorities to try and investigate Anonymous or WikiLeaks, through the online world, it's so easy to manipulate people's perceptions online that to sort of prove who is who and what's going on, there really did seem to be compelling evidence that Lulzsec was talking to WikiLeaks, and certainly someone from the inner circle. That was happening with that person who was sitting right next to Julian Assange. But to actually prove that Assange was giving the order, I think would be very difficult for the authorities to do.
Thanks for that clarification, Parmi. How do you think, as a whole, Anonymous has changed the culture of the internet?
That's a great question. I think it really has pushed forward the boundaries of what people can do online. And it's important to note that Anonymous has been kind of spun out of this culture of trolling and pranking. This is really where it came from. Its roots are in jokes and harassing people for fun, this kind of internet subculture that comes from image boards. And it's only in the last few years that it's taken a more serious direction.
That was Parmi Olson, Forbes London Bureau Chief and author of the book, We Are Anonymous.